Hello,
All
I'm
right,
Eric
welcome
Landrum from the
back
Psych
to
Sessions
I think
Network
I can
and
call
also
this
a
a
Season 3
special
co-host of
edition
Teaching Matters,
of Teaching
along with co-host
Matters.
Dr. Rob
And
McIntyre
it's
from Lincoln
always
Public
lovely
Schools
when
in Lincoln,
someone is
Nebraska.
willing to lower their
We're pleased to
standards
bring you
again
this
and
collection of 10
come
episodes
back and
recorded from
visit us.
September
Hey, it's Casey
2021
Swanson.
through
Hi,
April
Casey.
2022.
Hello, Eric. Hello,
2
Rob.
episodes in
Hello,
Season
hello.
3 featured guests.
It's so
In
good to
episode
see you
4, we
again.
speak
And
with
so in
Casey
our
Swanson from
pregame
Plymouth High
chatter, which
School
seems
in
appropriate
Canton,
for this
Michigan.
analogy,
And in episode
our
10, we
pregame
speak with
chatter,
Ginger
Casey
Wickline
asked me,
from
what did you
Georgia
ask me,
Southern
Casey?
University
I
in
asked when
Statesboro,
Boise
Georgia.
State switched to a
As
blue-colored
usual,
football
a
field,
wide range
if
of
that had
topics are
any sort of
discussed across
impact on
these 10
student
episodes.
enrollment at
Here
Boise
is
State.
just a
So I would
sample.
say not
Research
immediately
methods,
because
student
the
mental
switch
health,
actually happened in
hypothesis testing,
1986.
fictions teachers tell themselves,
So I'm not so sure
self-care
they were
tips,
savvy enough to
assessment
start
chat,
tracking it.
rubrics,
But I can tell
AP
you that I
psychology,
think
IB
the general
psychology,
consensus is
high
that
school
it has
teachers making
gained and
connections
garnered
with college
positive
teachers, understanding
attention. I think it
graphs,
clearly
accreditation,
obviously garnered
rather
positive
than doing
attention
more,
with
purposely
regard
doing
to
less.
sporting
The
events.
subjectivity of
But
grading,
here's the one that I
study
do know
skills
the data
advice,
about. A
modality
January
switching during the
1st,
semester,
2007 day that shall
adapting
live
to
in infamy.
natural
Boise State
disasters in one's
wins
life,
the Fiesta
using
Bowl
storytelling
over Oklahoma
purposely as a teaching
42-43.
strategy,
So
the
that's
professional
January
demeanor at
1st.
conferences,
In the
improv
spring
for
semester,
teachers,
Boise State
why oh why
is
extra
tracking
credit,
carefully spring
STPs, This Is How I
admits,
Teach
right?
blog,
And what
hearing the
happened, and then
diverse
fall
voices of
admits,
teachers of
obviously.
psychology,
And what happens
so
after
much
the
more.
Fiesta Bowl
Please enjoy
is that
Season 3
the
of Teaching
average
Matters from Psych
undergraduate
Sessions.
GPA of those who are admitted goes up. The average graduate student GPA goes up after the Fiesta Bowl. So what our president at the time said is that the blue turf and Boise State athletics were in some ways the window to the university, that people started watching and got attracted to Boise State through the football program and the blue field, but actually then people started looking at the academics behind, or what we like to say, beyond the blue. And then all of a sudden they started noticing, and we have some data that better students started applying and coming to Boise State.
Wow.
Learn something new every day.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure if that was worth learning for you, but I mean, it's actually, all kidding aside, and you can kid as much as you want, it's a pretty cool thing. When you play NCAA football, you can pick a green field or Boise State blue. I mean, how many other people get marketing in a game that goes out to millions of potential college students, right? I mean, it's been copied. I think there's a purple field out in Connecticut. Eastern Washington has red. The NCAA had to pass rules that grandfathered in Boise State so that not everyone would go crazy with different colors of fields. So
Wow.
That was my next question, is how many other schools have copied it? But
yeah, and every so often they have to replace turf because AstroTurf, ages over time and weathers. And so every time they rip up that turf, they save every inch of it and they slice it and they sell it. And so it's a fundraiser. It helps raise money for scholarships. It's given to donors at certain donor levels. People around here are very savvy about it.
all
That's
right,
cool.
Yeah.
new ideas.
Yeah.
I like it.
And being savvy is actually a pretty good segue into, Casey, what you and I and Eric, one of the topics we thought about talking today was savviness of high school folks like us who are interested in psychology about college level psychology, and savviness of college level psychology folks about high school psychology, and then maybe brainstorms about how we can help each other be more savvy about the other context for our students.
Yeah, sounds great.
Yeah, Casey, if you wouldn't mind, recap some of the things that you've tried. And I know you shared some frustrations that you've had in an email. Can you kind of recap kind of what you've attempted and kind of what your goals are? And maybe we can just orally troubleshoot together, the three of us.
Sure. So one of my inquiries, and I think this is where it really started, is just I want to know how to do better, how to bridge some of the gap. The TOPS, so the teachers of psychology in secondary schools, there's a guide to how to reach out to universities and university faculties to establish a local chapter of TOPS. And there's some guidelines about reaching out to departments or sending out an email or phone calling. I've tried, I would say, positionally, some context, I'm in an area just outside of Ann Arbor. So there's about 10 universities that are within an hour's drive from me. I'm very fortunate and very blessed to be in a place that really has a lot of great universities. And as I initially wanted to look to reach out to get the Michigan chapter of TOPS active again and build some networking without having to necessarily go to the west side of the state, I have to hope where Dave Myers is at. Just looking at some local connections, maybe taking a field trip with some students to hear some grad students talk about their labs, any number of things. Just building some resources of local psychology department meetings in the area or presentations that I might give at local libraries. I would just kind of hit a roadblock of, I send out emails to various professors at local schools, trying to email the department chairs if I can find them on the websites, just even a contact within the department. And I would say at most universities, there was no response. And then at only a handful of universities was there just even an initial response of, oh, tell us more what you're thinking about. And then quickly there's just a fall off of just communication. And this is really, I think for me, it's centered in wanting to understand how to do this better, not only for my students as prospective students at psychology departments, as we're trying to help them become savvy about learning what departments have to offer, but then also building capacity for school teachers that may or may not have psychology training. How can we bridge the gap and potentially help connect with some resources for those staff that are either new with no background or inexperienced that want to grow, or even people that have been at this a while that just want to learn more and keep up with current research. So that's kind of my impetus of wanting to learn how can high school teachers potentially bridge that gap without layering on additional responsibilities or burdens to a university department or faculty members that are already really busy doing tons of stuff.
Yeah, you bet. Rob, should I let you go first? Because I could probably take the next half hour with strategies.
Sure, I'll throw in some more high school flavor, but just really briefly, the in my area, we're proximate to one large state institution, University of Nebraska Lincoln, but then we have Wesleyan University, which is very small, 2,000, 3,000 liberal arts campus, and then a couple other even smaller institutions that are close to us. And historically, back when I was teaching psychology at Lincoln Southeast High School, I had really good relationships with a couple of folks at both institutions. But when they moved on, that relationship moved on and it didn't get institutionalized. It was just personality and personal contact driven. So, like Casey, the next time I asked, it was pretty much crickets. I'll give credit where credit is due. There's a University of Nebraska person now, Carolyn Brown Kramer,
Yeah.
who has published in the area of scholarship of teaching and learning and is fantastic. And she's been a speaker for my high school psychology club, and she's willing to do it, but it's definitely her and not the department. And if she was to move on, that relationship would evaporate again, and it's time to start all over. So like Casey, I don't know how to institutionalize something.
Yeah. So first off, kind of to both of you, really, um, I'm sorry it's so hard. College professors are filled with their own egos and their own career challenges, and our time is just as valuable to us as your time is to you. And I wish sometimes people were more generous, even if they had to take some time to say no and why they're saying no, as opposed to blowing you off. So, Casey, I'm sorry that you've had such a frustrating experience. I do have a couple of strategies to suggest, and yeah, it's tough. So like Rob has done, finding a key person. So going through the chair is in some ways the proper way to do it. You're kind of going through the front door, which is the proper way to do it. However, obviously that wasn't very successful for you. So once having knocked on the front door, you start walking around the house for other areas of entry, right? The front door is locked, no one's answering, keep ringing the bell. So is there a window open? Is the back door unlocked? You start walking around trying to get other ways, which is, I think, I don't know who the chair is at the University of Nebraska Lincoln, but clearly Carolyn Brown Kramer stepped up and met the call. And one of the things when she goes out and speaks to Rob's class at his school, she's going to put that on her CV as part of service. So that's a way that she gets credit for her effort, It gives her a chance to give a job talk and polish her talk. And plus, it's a good thing for her to do. The one thing I did think about, Casey, is that, you know, at places that you've completely struck out, like University of Michigan or Michigan State or wherever you're thinking about in that those 10 universities, you might take the admissions angle. So you might contact someone in the admissions office and say, "Hey, I have got a bumper crop of students who would make great incoming freshmen. I've had a hard time getting access to folks in the Department of Psychology to respond to me. And it might be someone in the admissions office that has a connection in the psych department that might get their attention more than a faculty member at a high school getting their attention. If I've got a buddy at admissions and they say, "Hey, pay attention to this email you're getting," sometimes the admissions pressure to pay attention might be better. And I'm sorry about this. The admissions pressure might be better than kind of a cold email from someone I don't know. So I would leverage, relationships that your school might have with admissions counselors at colleges that are
I think of
local.
I think about the power of it. We were lucky enough to have a teacher we arranged for the chemistry department at a big university real close. And they just had their grad students, talk about their labs and their research for 20 minutes each. And it was, the middle of some data collection or some work. And the grad assistant just essentially stopped for 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes and talked about the new types of energy batteries that they're working on or this new technology. And it was really pretty simple and casual for them. It was not a big production. It was, hey, here's 10 kids, come talk to them. And that is something that the students talked about for years. And we were intentional about trying to get some lab work or some lab students that were female, that were BIPOC. And
Yeah.
it was awesome. And it was extremely casual. It did not involve truly a lot of effort. I mean, we knocked on their door. We were going to be going to this lab and then to another lab and then to a third one. And when we got there, we just knocked on their door and very informally, no shirt and tie, no, magic dog and pony show, just, hey, this is what I'm currently working on today. And that moment of vulnerability. And then also we asked the grad students just tell their story. How did they ended up at this university? What was their up and down? For Ramad, impressionable 14 to 16-year-olds, oh my goodness, that was amazing. And we are not, I don't think, largely looking for an intensive amount of preparation. And I know that that's from my lens, and I know there's a lot more to it that goes on from the professor end or the grad student, and I don't want to feign otherwise. But those really informal moments are to a 16 or 17 year really inspiring and transfer and have the potential to be transformational in terms of what they might study. And so seeing that with some other disciplines, how easy it has been, and then to get this roadblock has been hard. And so I love these ideas of working with admissions office, just finding those individual pieces to try and plug into. And that's really my goal is just how do we get in to make some relationships?
Yeah. I think, the credit for that chemistry experience probably goes to the lead professor or professors who were running the labs, who cultivated that culture of those grad students were comfortable just speaking off the cuff. And if you found a psych professor willing to do that, they would. But if the psych professor is a tightwad and is all bound and only speaks in 45-minute segments and never does anything off the cuff, then their students are going to be the same way. So two more things. One is, I think you might be able to find that same model of, lab presentations that are casual and informal, but you might have to switch to Zoom and not have it be within 10 universities within 1 hour. You could probably put out a call and ask for that to have that done in a Zoom webinar, and you could probably get a couple of universities around the nation to do that in an afternoon, where they would virtually, have a graduate faculty member, go from lab to lab and do that and have them do a 4-minute lightning talk, so to speak, where, where it may not be local, but you could get grad students, to pivot from their lab and say, "Hi, you know, I'm so and so, and I'm here at Ohio State, and I'm doing research with Dr. Blah, blah, blah. And we're doing it on fetal alcohol recovery of pregnant mammals doing, I don't know, I can't even make it up, but and something like that. The other thing that I thought about, and this is way harder for on your end of it, but if you want to get the attention of faculty members, if you organized at the high school level a subject pool for
Mm,
of minors,
interesting.
so 17 years or less, and you organized it so that you facilitated, you can't prearrange it, but facilitated, I'll work to get you permissions from parents, and it's not consent, it's assent. Assent from minors, consent from parents, school, school superintendents. I guarantee you'd have developmental psychologists from those 10 universities interested in talking to you and coming out and working with you and providing access to them.
That is a cool idea, and I don't know anybody who's doing that. And your size campus, Casey, you might have the numbers that you could support that sort of thing.
Yeah, with 6,300 students on our site, I think that would be a big data set that people might be interested in.
That's really fascinating. The University of Nebraska, I know, has, and Boise, do you have an undergraduate participant pool or subject pool?
We do, and we only have in general psych a semester between 800 and 1,500
Yeah,
students, and we restricted 18 years or older because we don't want to deal with the hassle of parental
sure.
permission for 17-year-old college freshmen.
And to do, I don't know of anybody that has that sort of subject pool organized, and it's kind of like a blanket consent assent sort of sorta. It just sort of eases the process. You still have to go through a research proposal,
Yeah,
but organizing that at a high school level, I'm thinking about organizing it at a district level now. That might be a really interesting idea. Hmm.
yeah, if you can't
Um,
lure researchers out to that, well then screw them. I might have to edit that part out, but
Well, the kind of tail end of this conversation is you reference talking to the chair. So, so if I'm a high school teacher, how do I frame that email? Right? Like, I mean, without getting too nuts and bolts here, but really, like, in the flood of emails that they get every day and the stress, like, how do I, in a short, succinct way, communicate them
yeah,
that?
Casey, I'm not so sure you email the chair. I think you go to the website and you try to detect who's the most teaching friendly person on that faculty.
Okay,
I don't, because a faculty member who wants to collaborate with you doesn't need the permission of the chair because college faculty members are like cats. They're going to do what they want and there's no leader. Trust me, any chair who thinks they're leading, that's really funny. And I can say that because I'm a department chair right now. So yeah, I mean, if you want to, if if a junior faculty member thinks they need permission, they'll ask. That would be really kind of cute, though. But I would go to a website and try to find the most teaching friendly faculty person, or someone who wants to do work, or it seems like they're doing work with teenagers, preteens, or topics that are of interest. If they're doing it on alcoholism or marijuana use, or teen suicide ideation or something,
yeah,
that's how I would go after that crowd.
Eric, how would it be if STP has a directory on their site, so you could also look at the STP directory and look at your local institutions or the institutions you want to find or you want to connect with, and then find an STP member is a pretty good clue, right?
Yeah, you could do that. You could also go to project syllabus on
Yeah.
STP and look at who's posted child psych syllabi, adolescent lifespan development syllabi. You could also post on the STP listserv
Hmm.
and
okay,
say, "Hey, I'm a high school teacher. I am looking for possible guest speakers." I mean, even grad students looking to build their CV might love, even new assistant professors looking to build their CV might like to zoom in and do this. I go out to my local high school once a year and I do a talk on AP psychology prep. I was the AP psychology reader for 6 years in a row. They kicked me out. It was a good choice on their part, but I go out and I talk about some strategies, and then I talk about majoring in psychology and stuff like that. And I do it for 6 different classes throughout the day. I spend an entire day out there. I mean, so and over the pandemic, I did it via Zoom. So, I mean, this is a doable thing that college faculty members can do.
That's great. And that's really why I wanted to try and target some of these questions is because I know there are other high school psychology teachers that are listening and have also, just I think from my time at the summit, that was a common message that came up, the psych summit for high school psychology. That was a common message that came up is just, if there were established networks, it was really amazing. And then there was a lot of frustration of just, I don't know how to break in. I don't know how to make that connection. And so hopefully if as this comes to publication or posting that there are just even a handful of really concrete strategies that high school folks can use of how to build some connection. So
Yeah, I think Rob's suggestion about STP is a really good one. If you go to teachpsych.org, and I know you both know that, but I'm saying it for our listening audience. If you go to teachpsych.org and you root around who's active, if you go to the folks who are running committees and the folks who are publishing ebooks, and you just start looking at those names and start emailing college professors, not the same old people you see all the time, not people like me, not people like Regan Gurung. Don't go to those old repeats, do the same stuff over and over. Go to the up and comers who are really doing cool stuff and then just email them. And if they're too busy, they'll tell you, but odds are they could tell you 5 other people to think about because they're probably really well connected.
Very cool.
great.
There's a historical layer of this that I didn't think about before we started the conversation. I think there have been several pretty decent histories written about U.S. high school psychology, about the rise of U.S. high school psychology as a course and the nature of U.S. high school psychology as a course, because it's definitely gone through some different stages. Across those histories, I think it's a defensible generalization that the reason high school psychology is as strong as it is because of connections, largely because of connections with higher ed institutions. And there are some specific individuals like Ludi Benjamin and Charles Brewer who convinced the College Board to start the AP psychology program. And then I think those two plus some others were instrumental in getting the National Science Foundation to fund some month-long summer institutes. And it was those month-long summer institutes, I think, that jump-started a lot of our current high school psychology community. There's still a lot of high school psychology courses that aren't terribly science-based, but it's not near as common as it used to be. Now there's APA has national standards for high school psychology, and you'll find a lot more high school psychology courses and teachers who will say, we're teaching this as a science. And I believe that's largely because of connections with college faculty. So extending that argument, I think keeping high school psychology strong, continuing to connect with colleges is a big part of that. I think if we lose our connection, I think we are losing a lot.
Yeah, and I think if we lose the connection, it's the fault of on the college side. I mean, clearly high school teachers are motivated. They want to make the connection. You've got the backing of TOPS and APA helping you out. I mean, I'm just being blunt. I mean, it's going to be on the lazy side of college professors or overworked or however you want to phrase it. Sometimes we have to think outside our silo, Sometimes we have to stop gazing in the mirror and actually look beyond a mirror and look at the other parts of the world and see we have to make contributions in other places outside of where we think we need to publish next or what book we need to write, that kind of thing.
And flipping that, and then I want to hear what you have to say, Casey. There may be college folks who have reached out to high school folks and they haven't gotten much response from high school folks. That's entirely possible. There are definitely high school psych teachers who also teach 3 other things during the day and are going to ignore an email from a college psych faculty who want to make a connection. So that's entirely possible too.
It could be. You're giving college professors too much credit, Rob. That's very nice.
You might be giving high school folks too much credit too, Eric.
I doubt that. Come
That
on.
was an "Oh, Rob, but Eric" moment. But
Yes, it was. Yes, it was.
I've got a cautionary tale, unless there's something else you wanted to bring up, Casey. This is mostly for humor, but a cautionary tale about a connection not to make or a mistake not to make. But this would be a really difficult mistake to make now because of technology changes. And you're all smarter than I am. But as a newbie high school psych teacher, I had enough connections with folks at the University of Nebraska Lincoln that one of them, a guy named Gustavo Carlo, a fantastic developmental psychologist, he knew me well enough to call me up and say, Rob, our university psychology department, we're getting rid of all of our films. They used to, this is way back in the time when we're transitioning from film to VHS tape to digitization. So these were films. So they just been somewhere in some corner of the University of Nebraska, Lincoln, there are these cans of films that were gathering dust. So someone in the department noticed and they decided they're going to throw them all away. So he said, if you want to come over and get any of them and transfer them to video, they're yours to take. So I drove my pickup truck out to University of Nebraska Lincoln and loaded up the back of my pickup truck with cans of films and drove them back to my high school. And I thought this was going to be great. I had a very large psychology club at the time. So I thought I would harness some group effort. And I got all of the film projectors in the school at the time. We went to the gym, and I think I had 8 film projectors set up, and I had 8 groups of students, and their jobs were load up these films, and then take notes for me about what the film was about. And I would use those notes to figure out which ones I was going to get copied to VHS, so we could actually use them in instruction. Thought it was a fantastic plan. It lasted all of 3 minutes when I heard giggling. What I forgot was University of Nebraska Lincoln had a very popular human sexuality course. And one of the first films that, and all these cans were unlabeled. So I didn't know what it was incredibly unwise. I was telling students to watch things that I had no idea what they were going to see. And I turned around and it was 2 very 70s looking naked people, and the camera was just panning slowly around them, and they didn't look very happy either. So I got to shut that whole effort down then and watch some of the films myself. I did turn a couple into VHS copies, but most of them got thrown away.
What are you doing? That was
I know.
for a human sexuality chapter.
Yep. I'm sure it was a very good movie that I did not have students watch.
Was it a movie or was it an instructional video?
It was definitely an instructional film. I'm not sure what was going to happen with those 2 very 70s looking naked people next, but I'm sure it was high quality.
Oh, Rob.
Yep. But Eric, sometimes those things happen.
That was Kama Sutra Part 1.
Yep.
You notice how Casey is being ever the diplomat and has muted himself.
And I realize telling that story as a teacher now, talking about films and film projectors makes me sound like I'm 70.
Film strips?
They were not film strips. The human sexuality film strip would have been even more interesting, I imagine. With an audio track with beeps that automatically advances the video.
It's now time to change the film strip. Oh my gosh. Well, it's hard to follow that.
I don't have a topic
Um,
that can match that. So
Jumping back to the idea of going through admissions, I never thought of that, Eric. I thought I was being clever when I was emailing college psych departments because I would put the word pipeline and freshman and admissions, but I might have been talking to the wrong people. I never would have thought to go directly to admissions.
Well, I just know as a department chair how, let's put it, it's not how people get my attention, how people get my dean's attention, who then commands my attention.
Oh man, and you made me think of something else. We used to have a really strong relationship with Nebraska Wesleyan University, but that was one person as well. That was Ken Keith, who was at Nebraska Wesleyan University. And his model was fantastic, and it pretty much evaporated with him too. Nebraska Wesleyan University used to do a psychology day, and they would invite all of the high schools in Lincoln and Omaha and anywhere else in Nebraska who wanted to get there. They took over their student rec area, and their undergraduate psych majors had to come up with a booth that they thought high schoolers would be interested in. So our high schoolers got to walk around for a whole day and talk to psych majors about, most of the booths were sensation perception, but there was some other stuff thrown
Yeah.
in there. It was really cool. They also have a rat lab, so they had their rats out doing their cool rat tricks, getting ready for the what was called at the time the Rat Olympics, and that was super popular. So yeah, I haven't thought of that in a long time, but that was a great model of a college actively making something that they knew would be useful for high school psych folks.
Rob, you made me think of something else. Casey, I know that on my campus, uh, we have Psi Chi events where we'll have a speaker. And Psi Chi in my campus struggles because we're a commuter campus. And we'll have an event about grad school, their careers, or we'll invite someone to talk about a research topic. And we have 830 majors, and we might have 10 people show up.
Wow.
And so, something, if you can get dialed into it, is that, when Michigan or Michigan State or whatever the universities, well, Michigan for sure, if you're outside of Ann Arbor, if they're hosting speakers, they're almost always open to the public. And if you and your students started showing up at those, and you're wearing your high school colors, seriously, a nice high school blazer, or nice, not a blazer, nice high school polo shirt, and then you're going up and your students are going up and asking really cool questions of the speaker, and then you as the teacher there, you're finding the faculty member just chit chatting. I mean, I think that's a really nice way, because a lot of times it's embarrassing for a host of an event, to have somebody come in and speak and have 10 people in the audience. If you bring 5 or 6 or 10 of your own high school students and make that audience bigger, you're helping out that faculty member, you're impressing the speaker, you're impressing the school. That could be a really cool way to build a relationship with local schools.
Great. Those are all some really great ideas and I think really manageable. I think, and that's the loveliness of high school psych is that students are so interested in any of those conversations to be able to stop, on the way home and, or debrief at a coffee shop with the students too. Those are pretty impressionable memories for students that are getting ready to go to university.
Yeah, and this Psych event I'm talking about that we did, we had it face to face in our student union building, and we also offered it on Zoom. So, I mean, local high school students could have attended on Zoom. In fact, quite honestly, your high school students could have attended on Zoom if we'd have gotten the word out.
That makes me think of the Skype with a Scientist website that's available, and they do have a database of scientists, and quite a few cognitive and developmental psychologists are on that list of. And I've had some really good luck with finding people that are really willing and excited to talk with high school students. So that has been another great resource of getting professors that have signed up for that or know about that service just available and accessible. And most of the professors that I've talked to said they only usually do 1 or 2 a year. So I'm thinking even here at my school where we have, I think 9 or 10 teachers that teach psych either half the day or all day long, just even at our own school to be able to utilize that service with greater frequency would be powerful alone.
Well, and Casey, I don't know, I don't want to make more work for you, so be careful with this. But you know, if you choose to be the hub, you probably could be, meaning you could invite a guy like me to speak to your students over Zoom, but then you could be the coordinator of inviting other high school teachers. So you arrange it for a time that's convenient for you and your students. We set it up, and then you go, okay, this Landrum guy is going to speak from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern. Here's the Zoom link, and you distribute it to your group, your consortium of 50 or 100 high school psychology teachers around the nation. And so, and after I do it, I'm going to tell Susan Nolan at Seton Hall, and I'm going to tell Missy Beers at Ohio State, and I'm going to tell Sue France at Highline College, and I'm going to tell Regan Gurung. I can't remember what school he's at. I'm gonna tell Garth Neufeld, and I'm gonna tell Steve Chu, and I'm gonna tell all my buddies. Hey, I did this really cool thing for this high school teacher. You should give him an hour of your time. By the way, you've just got your next 20 lined up.
Yeah.
But that makes more work for you. So you should think about it if you want to do that, because no good deed goes unpunished.
Well, that's where hopefully we can get our Michigan Tops branch up and running again, more active. And I think we're starting to see those come back as we're opening schools up a little bit more. I just received an email this week from Michigan State asking for a list of high school teachers. So perhaps there's somebody at
Cool.
Michigan State that is trying to connect, and whether that's for research or just to build networks. So hopefully that comes out of something there too. Because we definitely want to get things connected with more people. I really appreciate some of these concrete ideas that you guys have presented for high school teachers like me. This is how we make progress.
It's always a pleasure to make more work for others. And I'll push just a little bit more. I know you keep saying Michigan tops, but why not Midwestern tops? Why limit it to one? Why limit it to the state? I know it's easier to think like that. And trust me, I'm not the one that normally thinks big like this, but um, I know you're limiting it to the state because that makes sense. And if career wise, it's better to sell it that way and you can get better support, that's what you should do. But that's just a boundary, artificial boundary.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And I think, go ahead, Casey. I think it's traditionally been geographic, but we may not need to think that way anymore. So the local TOPS chapters traditionally have been state-based, I think mostly because the meetings were in person and there's just a long way to schlep to get to a meeting. But now that we're more focused on Zoom, there may not be a good reason to do that. There is a New England TOPS, I think, but most all those states are kind of crammed together up there, so that kind of made sense. But maybe we don't need a separate Nebraska TOPS, Iowa TOPS. Those two exist. And then a Kansas top, I think they're still active. Maybe we want to think bigger than that. I don't know. If the meeting's virtual, geography turns into an irrelevant variable in organization.
I know pre-pandemic, I had talked with Emily at APA that there'd been some interest of having an Idaho tops. There is not a version of that in my state. And I had talked with someone in the high schools about trying to start it. That was pre-pandemic, and then all hell broke loose. So I think if we were to start it, it'd probably start virtual, and it'd be lovely to meet face to face. Of course it would be, but I think virtual is going to be sustainable.
Yep.
Yep. Easier to spring a teacher for an hour long Zoom call too than
Yeah.
to getting a sub for a whole day.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's a model that colleges don't often understand, or college professors don't often understand.
Yeah. Thinking in 50-minute time increments is one of the first communications to have.
Or thinking about a substitute, or thinking about how difficult it is to have programming on anything other than a Friday.
Right.
And thinking about how a Friday can be challenging.
Right.
I sit on one of the STP travel grants for high school teachers, and part of that guideline is that it's for the travel, and it does not address the substitute costs.
Which is silly.
And I think we had one applicant this year for
Oh, wow.
our travel grant, and I know some of that might be pandemic related, but I mean, there's that extra cost of, if you're going to go to a NITOP or one of the others. I mean, that's definitely a huge cost as well. So I think our team on that STP travel grant are trying to be aware of that and trying to make some recommendations to modify that a little bit.
Please do.
But because we want to support those high school teachers getting out and seeing just the different elements. I was
The
excited.
money is clearly there. Hopefully there's no stupid APA policy that prevents that change.
I don't think there is. I think it's just a matter of taking the time to revise it and presenting a case.
Yeah.
Speaking of thinking big, and this is pretty big, but from the college side, and I'm only saying this in case there are some college folks who listen to this who might be interested in this as an opportunity for career advancement. But a large part of the history of high school psychology, as I said, involved NSF grants, and that's probably not so likely anymore. But there are a whole bunch of other grants that supported high school psychology from the college side. And I think some college level psych faculty that helped them advance their career. So there have been smaller summer high school psychology teacher training programs that have gone on that have been grant funded, that have been all run by college faculty. So if any college person wanted to get into that kind of thing, I think you can get high school psychology teachers to show up. And there's no replacement for an extended learning opportunity for those of us who are teaching high school psychology with very little psychology training. It's just a reality. Most of us start teaching high school psychology after having taken intro and maybe one other class. And that's terrifying. I learned to be a psychology teacher at the Texas A&M summer, Ludi Benjamin's Texas A&M month-long summer institute. It is where most of my content knowledge came from as a high school psychology teacher. So that's big. Getting a grant isn't trivial. Running a summer workshop for high school teachers isn't trivial, but it has been done before and it could be done again.
So Rob, maybe by the time this episode releases, do you think you could track down a couple of links to current grant funding sources that we could include with this episode?
I can sure try. I can think of some people that I would ask. And the current model, the only two that I know of are APA through Lee Gurrell, the Clark workshop and the now OSU workshop.
Yeah, but those aren't things that college faculty can apply to host.
Right.
Those are things that high school faculty can apply to attend.
Right. Yeah, I can ask. Ken Keith ran a 2-week one. So I can ask, I think his was Arthur Vining Davis. So I can see if and I know college folks used to ask him how he ran his 2-week one. So I may just ask him for an update, like what advice he's sending lately.
Because I think I misunderstood your original point. I thought your original point was that college faculty, there are opportunities for college faculty to organize these and offer them.
That was my original point, but I don't know the details about that. I'm only basing that claim off the fact that it was done in the past.
Okay.
I'm
not so sure.
Think from the National
Maybe it's
Endowment for Humanities, which runs a lot of those 2 to 3 week really intensive teacher, offsite trainings that are really in depth about a specific historical or literature or cultural component. I looked a few years ago to see if we could make a connection to a psychology department, and it seems that we're in that half-C zone of partial humanities, partial science. Where do we fit? But I'm wondering if that could be a gateway to potentially a funding stream from a national source.
So Casey, what agency did you say?
That was the National Endowment for Humanities.
Oh, NEH. Okay.
Yeah, which they run a whole host of series for college professors and then also for high school teachers usually as well.
Gotcha.
So,
all right.
I tried to go to one of the college ones but they were not willing to budge. So it's a really cool philosophy, self-identity kind of epistemology course. But again, those are resources that are available, that I think could be tapped into if there was an interested faculty member that was really looking to host some sort of in-depth conference or workshop. And that pays for travel and it pays for flights and housing and all of those things too.
And I don't want to get too far off topic, or maybe I do. I like to think that if folks come up with cool ideas like this, and if there isn't a funding source, that maybe from time to time we can go out and find that funding source. Rob and I were part of something where we wanted to have a group of 7 people go off and just do a deep dive into assessment and just kind of really go off and spend some time over a summer and get away from the grind and spend like 3 days, 2 nights. And we were able to write a grant to do that from a couple agencies, and went to Austin, Texas for a couple days in July and rented a house and 7 faculty members. And if you stitch it together, you can find the funding to do that kind of thing. And I wish there were more agencies that were kind of open to that. We did it through APS the teaching fund there. It'd be nice if there were flexible programs at a higher dollar amount that could allow, hey, I want to host 50 high school teachers on my campus this summer. I want to pay for them to all attend. I want to give them all a stipend. I want to fly them all in to Boise, Idaho. I need 200 grand to do that. Those aren't lying around as far as I know, but I have not looked.
Well, that's a good challenge. I'll try and ask around, but you might be right. Maybe that's something that existed in the past but doesn't exist anymore.
But but imagine the chance to have, 50 high school teachers and a handful of college teachers running a workshop together for 5 days, 4 nights on a college campus where you work hard as heck all day long and you play hard and enjoy the local. You float the Boise River one night, you go to the Idaho Shakespeare Festival another night, you go to downtown Basque Block another night, you do the local stuff at night, but you work hard and you learn together during the day or whatever city you do it in. You keep Austin weird, whatever it is, right?
Well, and those summer opportunities for teachers, and I'm speaking in the past tense now because I guess they all were in the past tense except for the Lee Gurrell Clark OSU one. But there's the Texas A&M one that I mentioned. There was one at Northern Kentucky University that ran for at least 4 years and maybe more. There was the one at Nebraska Wesleyan. Rick Cashaw ran one that was in a couple different places. I think Houston for a while and then elsewhere. For a long time, the class list or the participant list from those summer workshops mirrored one-to-one high school psych teacher leadership in the APA and the AP reading. So the classes that came out of those summer experiences were the leadership for high school psychology
Absolutely.
nationally for a long time. So if those opportunities don't exist anymore, then it just makes it harder for high school psychology to advance, I think. Huh.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I don't know if this is a useful place to take the conversation, but Casey, if you could envision the perfect or a really, really cool partnership for your campus and a higher ed or maybe a couple higher ed places, psychology departments, what would that look like? I'm springing that on you, so you don't feel free to say I'm not going to answer that right now, but
I think just access so I think it's symbiotic, right? I think the idea of having a greater access to populations that can be a part of research for our own learning or for the department's learning, but also just building a partnership of this idea of, we're a place that's informed by science and by psychology and how it can be used to advance all sorts of things. I think there's so many realms of psychology that are relevant to a high school setting or to a K-12 setting. There are so many elements that are touching education overall. And with the exception of some nationally funded, drug usage, surveys that come out, we largely don't really have any interaction with universities. And so I see there's opportunities for data collection for the universities, but also for schools of educational psychology, certainly cognitive and developmental psychology. I see lots of partnerships for just education in general, just with the idea of improving faculty knowledge and awareness of psychological principles. I joked, in one of my last emails to y'all that we had a PD that ended with recommendation that learning styles be a factor of
yeah.
of we had the curricular decision making process, and we laugh and joke about that, but this is so deeply entrenched, and we only bust these myths if we continually talk about it and name it and discuss it and practice it. But I'm, I guess, biased with the idea of the cognitive psychologist having greater access not only to students but also to teachers. I just did an analysis of some local ed psych programs, or not ed psych programs, ed psych syllabi, and I was shocked at how little cognitive science was present in those ed psych
Isn't that
classes
weird?
at School of Ed, like every potential teacher takes. I think memory was only about a week and a half. And I just, like as a school teacher, yes, I understand testing and, special education certification, but really the classroom teacher, we don't deal with testing and assessment with regards to the special ed population we don't actually really do that often. It's left up to the school psychologist. And I think the cognitive psychology departments have such and this is naive on my part, right? Is this like really simplistic and reductionist, but it's perhaps one of the huge areas for schools that just don't ever provide their teachers with training in cognitive psych about memory and learning it. I just I can't lead enough PD. There's just not enough spots in our PD schedules. I mean, we could train teachers all day long on that. So I really see that as a critical element that I think a partnership with universities and schools could do is just the teacher training. That's a whole nother conversation about how do we think about memory and learning and the actual process of cognitive load and how do we actually think about those things. But for me, a relationship with learning scientists would be huge for schools. And it's just a vacuum. We really want quick fixes. Here's this buzzword in that just I know I'm talking to two guys that get this and understand that, but I think for me, an ideal situation would be having a relationship so that we don't have to do things fast in 1 hour increments or 2 hour increments. We have relationships so schools are supported with cognitive psychology. I have no idea what that actually would look like or how we would ever get there, but just this relationship of really rooted in the psychological science. I mean, it makes me a little emotional thinking about the power of what that could be if everybody understood memory, retrieval, encoding.
Maybe
goodness.
it's different at the high school level, but so your syllabus actually reflects what you teach in your class? Wow. So you actually think that, if it has 1 week of memory in the syllabus, your teachers are teaching 1 week of memory in the actual class. That's impressive.
I mean, those are the artifacts that I have access to.
There you go. I mean, wow. That I suspect high school teachers are better at following the actual details and instructions that they provide than college professors are.
Yeah, and that's
I think
yep, go ahead.
the other artifact for me is, but this is really outdated now, so I should talk with more recent graduates of teachers colleges, but I'm not sure. I know I didn't get much psychology of memory in teachers college training, and I should have. I share Casey's assertion that that is super important research for K-12 teachers to know about at all levels. And I do get to talk with more recent graduates of teachers colleges, and they still seem somewhat surprised to learn about retrieval practice and storage strength and retrieval strength. And in some ways, those are the basics that we should learn during teachers college to build off of. So I share Casey's vision that a great partnership between a psych department and a K-12 system could be that expertise in things like the science of teaching and learning and memory science.
Or Xerox any chapter 6 of any intro psych textbook on the market.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah,
And I'll own some of this. I taught that chapter for 13 years. It took me way too long to figure out the connections between that chapter that I taught for 13 years and my teaching. I didn't make that connection for a long time. So helping teachers make that connection using science communication, I think, is worthwhile.
Well, I think the more current textbook authors are much better at making it. I mean, a little bit of that, Rob, is on the book author because they should have made it very clear that, oh, by the way, this chapter is all about, could have been renamed study tips.
Right.
Yeah. A lot of my colleagues will teach that chapter first because, for example, and I think it's a good strategy, if a student's going to drop out of that class, teach it first. So at least there's a gift of, if you're going to keep in college, stay in college, but drop out of my intro psych course, I'm at least telling you something that could be useful to you in other courses because
Agreed.
this is science, no matter whether or not you stay enrolled in psychological science.
Yeah, I think part of my perspective in this comes from I do work with about 45 current student teachers that are getting either undergraduate students in the School of Ed or master's students that are returning to get a degree in education, in secondary education. And so I am pretty connected with what the students are currently doing in their semesters. And I do think about one of those and this is the training versus teaching, or that we could talk about with teachers, that just giving them access to even those chapters. That doesn't mean they are embedding it in their practices. And I would really, there's a slight movement in some of the teacher training or educational training schools to move towards a rounding kind of practice, or where it, like you develop doctors, or oftentimes those, physical therapists or healthcare practitioners, where it is a lot more of a residential kind of process. And there are some schools of ed that are moving towards this idea of a kind of a rounding or a residency versus, a semester of this, a semester of that. Now you're student teaching on your own, go for it. And that's where we develop. And I think one of those elements, tying back to the professional development pieces, would be schools. I mean, this is kind of, I guess, something that shouldn't be psychology teachers' responsibilities. Would be great part of that training or that workshop should be, how do you go back to the school now as the representative of psychology, whether that's with your 3 credits of intro, the developmental psych, but you have more training even with those 6 credits than the majority of your staff. Is, how do we empower young teachers or new teachers of psychology to say, great, we want you to go back, we want you to make a contribution. The APA has those 20 guidelines or the 20 principles. As I look to access that, that's cumbersome for me to try and implement that at a school. Well, how could I even lead professional development on memory and limit the memory? So I think if an element of our professional development could be empowering teachers to take that back to schools. So I think, kind of coming back to Rob's question, what would be an idealistic component would be great. A partnership would also be, how do we use science communication or distribution of that knowledge? How do we help teachers at a one-day workshop? Here's an hour PD that you could do for your teachers. Just a depth of processing activity that will blow teachers' minds when they see that.
To their credit, APA has done some really nice work on science communication, and they used to have pre-pandemic a traveling workshop. They've partnered with Alan Alda in the Science Center out in Stony Brook. I love some of their stuff. I've started to dabble in some of the improv work in terms of improving teacher communication in the classroom, dealing with difficult issues that come up. It's really cool stuff. But by and large, I think science communicators in psychology are not well trained and not well prepared, and teachers get caught off guard. And I think in our age of diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's even more important to be sensitive to and have tools in the, arrows in the quiver to be prepared for situations we're not ready for, but yet have some tools to be sensitive when those situations do arise.
I agree.
We actually lead some of our cognitive science principles workshops that I and some other teachers lead, are actually centered in anti-racist practices, with the idea of this ties into some of the institutional racism grades, right? We really think about formatting of, like, marking people off for APA format, that unless you're really explicitly teaching that, that's quite an assumption to make that people know any formatting style. But is that, if there are skills that are being taught at home or not taught at home, this is disadvantaging students.
Yeah.
And so if by teaching some of these cognitive principles explicitly to students and to teachers, we're attempting to make it more accessible and equitable, so that all students have these cognitive strategies that are going to help them succeed. That is at the core work of it. If we are making sure it's taught with intentionality across disciplines, then that's a really important thing to providing kids access to be able to self-regulate and self-monitor and practice metacognitive strategies. And so that's my urgency, is we have to do this because it's ethical and it's principled to be doing this as practitioners, as educators. And if we're not, we're perpetuating existing differences and stereotypes, and that is, disproportionately affecting population.
I agree, and there's no good way for me to transition. I just wanted wait till you got that super important point done. I've got another appointment, so I've got to have to transition out. So I apologize.
No, it's important.
Sorry, Eric.
Hey, let's circle back to it. Hey, how about next Friday, same time?
Perfect. Sounds good.
Sounds good to me.
All right. Thank you.